Okay, hello everyone. Good evening, morning, afternoon, from whichever part of the world you are joining from. It's Mohammed Ishan here with you joining you from Dubai, UAE. And first of all, we warmly welcome you to week 7 of our weekly webinar series that is empowering finance professionals to play a business-centric role at the forefront, that is hosted by Hub of Finance Transformation-HOFT. And today we are going to cover a very interesting, insightful topic on leadership development, that is 7 shifts towards the mastery of great leadership. And this topic is going to be presented by our very special guest speaker, Ms. Talita Ferreira. She has already joined us from United Kingdom. Just I would like to give you her background. Talita is an experienced C-suite executive, non-executive director, and chair of audit consultant, author, international speaker with more than 25 years of corporate experience with global brands including KPMG, Investec Bank, BMW, and Ford Credit Europe Bank. She understands the financial language of business strategy and risk as an experienced CFO and balances this with her expertise as an executive board director of people helping organizations and leaders to transform. So she has a quite rich corporate experience in the field of leadership, and she also used to interview lots of finance and other corporate leaders. And of course, we can get lots of value from her in her presentation, as she's going to share all her research work as well as her experience. So just before moving on, I would just like to quickly tell you about the logistics of this webinar. It's going to be a 1-hour webinar, and we will have a Q&A at the end. And during the session, if you have any question relating to presentation from Talita, you can just simply drop your question in the chat box, and we will try to address as maximum questions as possible at the end of the session. During the session, just I recommend you to please keep yourself on the mute mode and keep your webcams off in order to avoid any distractions during the webinar. And those of you who are joining us for the first time, just I would like to quickly take you to our Hub of Finance Transformation and its in our background, who we are and what's our vision and mission. So Hub of Finance Transformation is a learning platform that is developed to transform accountants and finance professionals into strategic finance leaders. And this webinar series, that is actually a 3 months long learning and development journey that we have started, and this is also one of our initiatives to support our global community of finance professionals who aspire to transform themselves into strategic finance leaders in their career, who want to transform their careers. So our mission, as you can see, is to build a global network and community of highly polished, tech-savvy, and strategic-minded accounting and finance professionals with a unique ability to add tremendous amount of value to their employers, businesses, families, and communities. So our ultimate aim is to create, nurture, and maintain an environment of growth, challenge, and unlimited potential for all those around us. And these are our core values. And one of our key core values is collaboration, as we collaborate with world's leading finance speakers who have decades of experience in the field of finance, accounting, and leadership, including technology and finance business partnering. And these are our main contributors. It's me, myself, Mohammed Zishan Takhi, and my partner, Mohammed Al Rubi. We are the co-founders of Hub of Finance Transformation, this learning platform. And these are our major contributors at HOFT, who used to share such insightful research and latest content in the field of finance, finance transformation, and on digital and emerging technologies. And this is the framework that we have formed at HOFT on strategic finance leadership. So this is based on the 6 main pillars, as you can see on your screen, including personal, public, technology, strategic, operational, and financial leadership. So in all our weekly webinar series and our previous summits, we used to give flavors from each of these pillars to our global community of finance professionals who aspire to take more senior level positions in the field of accounting and finance. And this is the framework that you can use to transform yourself into world-class strategic finance leader. And today also, as Talita, she has an expertise, lots of expertise in this area of leadership. So of course, she will be giving you different flavors and different background regarding leadership development from her own experience. So without taking further time, I would just like to release my controls and give it to Talita. Okay, just give me a second.
So Mohammed, I'll do the presentation part a bit later. So
okay.
I think we'll start with some questions from Mohammed's side.
Yeah, Mohammed Al Ruby will be having some questions during the sessions, like a panel discussion. So I will just make you the presenter, so you both can take the control of this webinar. Yeah, okay.
Hello, Talita. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello, Mohammed.
Yeah, actually, I'm very excited having you today, and really, I have a long list of questions because I'm very excited having you today. So let me start with, if you can give us a quick brief about your career, your experience, and your areas of expertise.
So, Mohammed, I started my career in South Africa many years ago. I'm a qualified chartered accountant with KPMG. So if anyone was wondering to place the accent, that's where it's from. And after qualifying with KPMG as a chartered accountant, I did some consulting for KPMG in governments and emerging markets. I then moved to banking and worked for Investec Bank. And it was really a tremendously fulfilling experience to learn all about banking. But at the time, the rave was going into the front office of banking into deal making. So I joined a smaller bank that was supposed to list. And if you could call it that, I had my first career disappointment because the bank didn't list. And I decided that was an absolute sign for me to go back to the safety of accounting. So I moved back to the safety of accounting and decided that accounting was better for me and joined BMW in a low-level leadership position in BMW. I very quickly realized that if I didn't go to the heartbeat of the company, so into Munich, that I would not be able to progress my career. So I spent 3 years in South Africa, then went to Munich with BMW. Then when they deemed me fit to be a CFO, they sent me to the UK, where I became the CFO for BMW Financial Services. I spent 8 years there working for 3 different CEOs, going through the economic crisis, which was very challenging. And then I got promoted to the top 300 level in BMW. And I was promoted to the CFO and Chief People Officer of the sales company in the UK. And that was, I would say, my first career surprise. So I had worked very hard to achieve that. For 12 years, I had worked to achieve that, getting into that top 300 leadership group. And when I got there, I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of the 20 years of my career that was left there. So I started on this journey of trying to understand what is my passion, what is my purpose, what really drives and ignites me every day. And after a 4-year period, I left BMW. I wrote a book during that time. In the last couple of years of corporate life, I totally changed what I do. And what I do now is I train directors on leadership and strategy for the Institute of Directors. I have a training platform called Finance Inspired for Success. And I've decided to focus on finance professionals and help them through these challenging times in leadership and strategy. And I'm also a non-exec director for a medium-sized bank, Ford Credit Europe, and I'm the chair of their audit committee. So in a nutshell, that's the journey, Mohammed.
Thanks, Talita. That's awesome career journey. Really, I see you you handle multiple great senior roles across your career. So I would like to jump to the second question, which is, what would you say is the greatest leadership insight from your career?
So the greatest leadership insight from my career really is that one has to focus on your own self-development. And I'll tell you why I say that. So when I got made the chief financial officer of BMW Financial Services, I had a CEO who sat down with me and he said, yes, you're the chief people officer too, because I had this dual role on the board. But he kind of, and these are my words, not his, he was very polite. What I received from the conversation was, you, like all the other CFOs, you won't be very good at being the chief people officer. So, I'll just take that away from you later. And, then you can just be the CFO, because I'm convinced you'll do it just like a controller. As I said, he was very polite. He didn't say it like that, but that's what I received. And it was a little bit like a red rag to a bull, kind of saying to me that, you know, I'm not cut out to be a chief people officer because I'm really a finance person. And that kind of really defined my career, because I decided to really invest then in understanding how people, what makes people tick. And I had to start with myself. And so it was this process of understanding how to inspire people, how to motivate people. And I then started to lead leadership development change. I started to lead cultural change programs, and they just became bigger and more complex. And I really saw that what really makes people thrive, especially leaders, is firstly when they understand themselves extremely well, and secondly, they understand people really well. They understand what motivates people, what drives people, and they invest time in that. So those are some of the fundamental, let's say, things that I learned on that journey. And the second thing I would say, apart from the people dimension, is that the more you share of yourself, the more people will respond to you.
That's great, Talita. And you recently interviewed me for the global leadership hypothesis. What makes a great leader? So could you please tell us why you started this series?
So Mohammed, you know, when you're so convinced of something like I am, because of this dual finance and chief people officer role, and really fulfilling both those roles as a director, my boss in the end was very happy with how I then did it in the end. You're very convinced that embracing those softer skills, which of course I hate those words because I think they're business critical skills, people skills. So when you're so convinced of that as an individual, you want to share that with other people and really help them to see that that's what can make them thrive. And when COVID hit us, it felt a little bit for me like I was pushing this really big boulder up a hill. You know, that I was not, just my own voice in trying to convince people was not enough. So I decided that the way to do that would be to interview thought leaders, CEOs, chairmen of boards, influencers, and see what their views were, both from a personal point of view, what they see as great leadership, and then try to find a red thread with that in there to say, well, actually, this is what people are looking for in great leaders. So I decided to interview many people. I've now interviewed 26 people already. I will interview in total 28 people. And yes, I've released already 16 of those interviews. 12 of those interviews online under the Global Leadership Hypothesis, what makes a great leader.
Talita, that's a great initiative. And can you tell us a bit about who you have already interviewed for the series?
Yes, definitely. There's some very, very interesting people in there. They're the normal suspects, you know, that you will see in the finance community. Andy Burrows, Anders Lindberg, Chris Argent. So people that are familiar to us and who present quite a lot in finance circles. But then I've also interviewed very interesting other people. Vladka Lupik is a professor of leadership for Holt University. She's the 11th most influential HR thinker in the world. Gosha Gorner is a winner of Transformational Coach of the Year, who coaches many, many business leaders and board directors. I've interviewed Sir David Walker. He ran the Queen's household in the UK and was a general in the Air Force. And now he is the chairman of boards and also a member of boards. And many other board directors. Ibalola Amau is an entrepreneur who spent 25 years of her life as an entrepreneur building up companies as a CEO. There are other main board directors. There's Jack McCullough from the US, and he runs the CFO network in the US with many, many leaders there. So, you know, it's very interesting group of people, 28 people in total, many CFOs, many CEOs, many board directors, and just normal finance professionals, finance leaders who tell us what makes them thrive with their leaders.
Talita, that's awesome. But what do you plan to achieve with this series? What is the end games for this one?
So Mohammed, I'm looking for a framework. You know, many people believe that leadership is very difficult and it's outside our comfort zone. And I think when we start, it really is. But it's a little bit like my colleagues in South Africa would probably be horrified if I use this example, but it's a little bit like eating an elephant. You would never eat the whole thing all at once. You would try to create bite-sized chunks. So it's to create this framework that leaders know what is it that I need to do, and that they can see what might be easier for them to accomplish fast so that they feel good. And then to say, you know, what can I practically do in small steps on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. So it's to create firstly that framework, and then to create an offering that allows people to do it, and that can not be just this exclusive thing where, you know, like coaching, maybe it's very expensive to access great coaches, but that it's affordable to learn these things, to practice them, to do it with your people. So also then providing toolkits and ways of how to do it in a manner that makes it feel easier and effortless.
Brilliant. And what are the insights that you are gaining briefly?
So the insights are really, I ask many questions. So I ask about 7 to 8 different questions to people in the interviews, but I'll just focus on 3. So the main 3 is what makes a great leader, where should a leader start, and what holds a leader back from reaching full potential. And the very first one, so what makes a great leader, there are really 3 things that most of the people are talking about or alluding to, and then a 4th way of how do we do it. And the 3 things are what makes a great leader is, the first thing is vision and direction. It's definitely about having a purpose, having an end goal, starting with the end in mind, and being able to direct people to that place. The second thing is, it's all about people, and it's very much about motivating people, inspiring people, taking people along with you, having an interest in people, connecting with people, seeing people as individuals. And then the third area is really what I say, the areas that are underdeveloped leadership areas. So vulnerability, empathy, servant leadership, serving your people, helping them to grow and develop, making space for their potential, stepping back from that ego-based place. And then the 4th one I said was the delivery mechanism, and it's really about role modeling it all the time, and role modeling the good behaviors as a leader. And then the second thing about where should a leader start, what I'm seeing definitely is that people should start with gaining a high level of self-awareness. It's the most mentioned word throughout the interviews, start with a high level of self-awareness. The second thing is, again, focus on individuals. So focus on people individually, and then on the collective as a team, on developing that collective as a team. And then the third thing ties very much into the third part of what I said, what makes a great leader. It's about showing vulnerability, showing empathy, really listening to people, really being engaged with people properly. So those are the main things that I've seen there. And then with the third thing, what holds leaders back, very interesting insights are coming forward. That's what really holds a leader back, is if someone thinks they need to know everything. A leader does not need to know everything. That's exactly how we work through our people and use our people and empower our people. The second thing that's coming up most about holding leaders back is fear, the fear base of not understanding, not understanding your own underlying fears, or having confidence issues, fears, or even imposter syndrome. And the third thing is really not being willing to go outside your comfort zone. So staying with your preferences and not really migrating to, really stretching yourself outside that comfort zone. So I would say those are the major insights from my side.
Thanks, Talita. And can you tell us more about those shifts to great leadership?
Yes, this is why I'll now go through a couple of slides just to explain those things to you, and explain the different the different areas that I really see are important and how that plays out. So the first shift is really cultivating an agile mindset. And what I mean by an agile mindset is there are certain ingredients that will really help you to cultivate that absolute winning mindset. And it's about having a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. And understanding that you have to self-transform as a leader, that you are consistently growing and developing, and it's not about statics. That's what I study, that's my professionalism. It's really a continuous process of developing. It's also about a mindset of connection and trust. If I don't have the answers, my people will have the answers, and it's important to build and bond that connection with my people. And it's about a service mindset. I've already spoken about servant leadership and serving your people, helping your people to grow and develop. So really the ingredients for that winning mindset is all about growth, self-transforming, connection, trust, and purpose. And purpose is one of the very, very important things, and I'll go into that a little bit later when I talk about teams. And I always like to say, you know, so what's in it for me? You know, what's if I get this mindset, what am I going to get if I take my time and develop here? And the answer is that you will be far more adaptable. Your resilience will increase. You will be able to recognize possibility and opportunity. And the research, and especially the neuroscience, is showing us that this is success for future. This agile mindset is, especially in times like COVID, what will help you to thrive. A typical example for me is if we look at the wording that we sometimes use in finance. You know, we sometimes say in finance, it didn't happen like that before, or that's not what the numbers are telling us, or that hasn't worked before, or we've tried that before. You know, those type of words are all fixed mindset. It's not growth mindset. Or in a personal way where we say, I'm not very good at that, or I'm not very good at, you know, maths, or I'm not very good at influencing people. Those are all fixed mindset. It's not an adaptive mindset or a self-transforming mindset. And I want to share an epic fail here with you, because I think stories also help us to understand things better. So let's talk about George. When I went to Munich, I encountered George. I was at a far more senior level within the group than George, but I took a step down to go to Munich and to learn how things were done within the group. And George was intellectually, his intellectual capabilities were far beyond mine, but it was almost like he was scaring people. And he was very good, very directive, very objective orientated, very target orientated. And he worked very closely with the financial services group CFO. And he would do an excellent job at explaining numbers, at pushing people to do things because of the numbers. And the CFO would kind of use him to be like a combative person for him. So if you wanted to like really convince people with arguments that were indisputable, you would send him. But on the softer skills, he wasn't very good. And, you know, it's just so funny. What always happened to him is that people would sit in appraisals and say, he's very good at his job, but he's not a next CFO. And of course, what George wanted to be was to be a CFO. So it was such a shame for George, I believe, because his personal ambition was to become a CFO, but because he never embraced that growth mindset, that possibility, he would always be focusing on, we've never done it like that before, that's not how we should do it, this is what the numbers are showing. He just didn't have that possibility mindset, and he believed that he was perfect. So he didn't believe that he needed to transform himself, and he had to give up on his dream. He's the last time I spoke to him many years ago, he was in internal audit, and I know he still hasn't reached the CFO level. So I do feel for him that is an epic fail and a huge you know, waste of opportunity, because I think he could have been an amazing CFO. So the first shift, cultivating an agile mindset. The second shift is focusing your leadership from the inside out. And the key ingredients there starts with self-awareness. And I already mentioned that that is really coming as a very, very strong theme throughout all the interviews. And it is also the emotional and social intelligence, and shifting from that control-based, I want to control everything, and fear-based area to more of a vulnerability and empathy leadership style. And I always say the indicative measure is here, what is said when you leave the room. And it's very interesting that I feel very early in your career, if you don't embark on this people-centric focus, there's a very big difference between how you see yourself and how other people will be seeing you. And I think it's really important to make sure that people actually see you in that right light, and that you kind of adapt yourself to that through self-awareness and emotional and social intelligence. And again, you know, what would be in it for me if I did that? I think one is far less impacted by what happens outside in the external environment. I became far more relaxed. People could press my trigger buttons less. So I would feel less triggered by my boss, by events, by things that happened, as my emotional and social intelligence and awareness of myself increased. I, of course, often heard within appraisal meetings, the person doesn't have enough gravitas, doesn't have enough influence. And of course, you know, that increases with that emotional and self-awareness. And I think one is able to build far better relationships and have more influence. And I really firmly believe that this is something that totally can limit a potential. This is the entry ticket. This self-awareness, social understanding, emotional understanding, this is what will limit a leader's potential. And it's also very clearly coming through all the interviews. And I want to tell you a success story here, because I honestly like success stories as well. And I'd like to tell you the story of Margaret. So Margaret was working in financial services in a very male-dominated environment. And Margaret was very unhappy. She felt very, very devalued. She felt like she was the only person really pulling her weight. She felt like no one understood her. She was working in a transformation team with lots of high stakes, lots of high, let's say, high priority interactions with very, very senior people. And she was just generally very unhappy. And she went home one day, and her 4-year-old son said to her, "Mommy, you're always so unhappy when you come home." And it kind of created a trigger moment for her. A light bulb went on, and she realized, I can't be continually spending my life being unhappy. And she spoke to her husband, and she decided she wanted to be coached and mentored. She enrolled for sessions. She started to read books. Her and I had a couple of sessions. And she basically went from spiraling down this very negative place to really uplifting herself, but from understanding herself far, far better, and then connecting to other people from that place. So fast forward 8 months on this journey that Margaret went. She was in the office, and it was like a transformation. People asked her, "So Margaret, do you have a new job, or are you pregnant? What's going on? You know, why are you so happy?" And she said she would just smile to herself and understand she had done the hard work and everything had changed for her. Her external environment did not change one bit. But what happened is those leaders that had been sidetracking her, not really supporting her, they started to promote her. They started to suggest her to other leaders as a potential candidate. And even in meetings, when others interrupted Margaret, the most senior leader would say, "Stop, Margaret said something. So, you know, let's just listen to what Margaret has to say." And absolutely, Margaret spoke to me about 6 months ago, and she said this absolutely transformed her life. It transformed her potential, it transformed her career prospects. So I really do believe this is something that is extremely, extremely powerful. I now get on to the third shift, which is to focus on individuals and connected relationships. And it's really to have a very strong strengths-based approach, to understand what is each individual's strengths, your own strengths, and to kind of work that out within the team. To cultivate this unconditional respect for difference. We all want to have different, diverse people in our teams, because that's what raises the innovation. But what very often happens to a finance professional or a very analytical professional is that we don't really respect difference. I often thought the marketing director was an idiot early in my career, and that was so silly. I was actually being the idiot because I never respected that there's a real difference between how we are DNA'd and wired. I would always have this tainted view when I looked at his proposals. And to be very honest, it didn't serve me as a leader, It didn't serve me as a board director, and it made me a really bad board director because I didn't really embrace my collective responsibility. And so I believe that that's unconditional respect, where just this is another human being, I'm respecting that they can have a difference of opinion, and I'm really going to try and listen, is something that's really important. And I think learning to suspend judgment. So exactly what I'm saying. Instead of judging someone immediately and saying they're different to me and therefore their opinion isn't valid, it's about suspending that judgment and learning to do that. So again, you know, what would be in it for you? It's really about harnessing collective brilliance. If we can do that and connect with people at a deeper level, we unlock brilliance, we unlock innovation, we unlock creativity. And we really build trust through very strong individual one-to-one relationships. They're called dyadic relationships, and I never knew how important they were, but my top tip here would really be to do that. And I would like to tell you a story about an epic fail. So one of the interviewees in my series was CJ Kujenga. And CJ says, in my early career, I was very, very just so. Everything had to be done the CJ way. It had to be just perfect or it didn't fit. And she would absolutely do that judging thing. And CJ says, I had this lady in my team and she wasn't performing and I gave her a really hard time and the team wasn't doing well because of it. And, you know, she obsessed with it in her career. And she looked and watched this lady as she progressed and saw that she actually was phenomenal later in her career. And CJ says, 10 years fast forward, I'm so sorry that I didn't take the time to invest with her directly, to understand what was wrong. And she really knows now that the lady had a sick child at the time. And if CJ had been more flexible, had been more interested in the individual, had given her more time, she would have transformed the team because she would have allowed her to go home and work from home later. But because it was just the CJ way at that early stage in her career where she was very analytical and less people orientated, she didn't do that. And if you listen to CJ's interview, she says that that's her epic fail and something that to today she's quite sorry about. A success story there is I had someone in my team. I had promoted him to take over a very large project. He wasn't performing in that project. It was just too big for him. And the reality was I felt responsible. And this is something else that I also want to share with you. When someone isn't performing and you're the leader, it's your responsibility. It's our responsibility to grow and develop them. If they're a square peg in a round hole, it's for us to fix that. And what I did with this individual is I knew that if I just, he was very senior in the organization. He had a good standing. I didn't want to ruin that for him, but I wanted to demote him within the project. And so what I did is I had run a facilitated session with us and look at our core strengths, look at how we each worked, look at our preferences, and then find something for us to really connect on, because I was becoming very disconnected from him because he wasn't performing. And we found that family values was one of the very strong things and that we had some similar preferences. By doing that, I really unlocked the door that he could see me as a human being and that he could see what I needed to do, and that he could see that although he didn't like it, that it was better for him and that he would be able to perform. And it so much helped the team. It helped him. He could still do something. He could still have a stage. You know, we didn't need to make him any less than he was before, but he wasn't the main project lead anymore, but he could accept it. And just from connecting with him at a deeper level and taking that time and investing that time, that really happened. So very, very important to connect with people at an individual level and then connected relationships. The next shift is really, the fourth shift is consistent, continuous team development. A lot of us think that team development is really about that once in a year or twice in a year when we go to an event, go to a venue and where we have a team building exercise and we do great things together. But it's about creating an engaging purpose for that team. And I will talk a little bit about purpose in the little while when I talk about the insights. But it's developing, engaging that team weekly, monthly on leadership themes. It's like I said before, what's everyone's strengths? What are their values? What are their communication styles? It's being a facilitator and a coach. And as a leader, understanding that I need to facilitate, I need to brainstorm, I need to work with that team as a group to raise that brilliance of that team. And purpose is really something that gives a massive sense of belonging to a team. And purpose is not objectives, it's not targets, it's not monthly reporting, it's none of those things. And I'll give you a bit of an example when I share the insights. But it's also what makes the team dynamic desirable. When you're continually developing that team, almost working with them at the same level as an equal, facilitating them. Of course, as the leader, you take the responsibility at the end, and of course, you make the final decision. But working more with them at an equal level to generate ideas, to generate leadership insights is something that also wants other people to join your team. And in my case, I kept people longer. Because I did this, on average, I would keep young graduates 2 to 3 times longer than any other department. And it's really what unlocks high performance. Without this, we can never unlock high performance. If all we are ever discussing with our teams is targets, objectives, work, projects, things like that, and only once or twice a year doing leadership type interventions, brainstorming, things like that, this is not good enough. This is something that we have to do weekly, daily. It's something that's really, really important. And it's really what made the very big difference in my career. So that same CEO who sat me down and spoke to me about being a chief people officer, when one day I was sitting with him and he said to me, Talita, your team is really the business prevention team. It's the most risk-averse team. And in financial services, I totally got that. But it meant for me that something needed to change, because he said something that really rang true. He said, without the front end of the business, without generating new business of high quality, we would never have a business. And if you don't sometimes help us in working out how to do that as finance, we will never have a business. So it really unlocked for me that I needed to do something with the team. And the other thing that I noticed in finance is with my team, there was never anyone to take over. When someone left, they had never really developed people behind them. So we started to work on our purpose together, and we came up with 2 main things. That we as finance empower the business. So our purpose was empowering the business to make better decisions. And we brainstormed this, and it's just, there's so much passion behind it. You can hear it when I say it, empowering the business to make better decisions. And our second one was to develop the next generation of business leaders. So we took on that as our purpose, and it really became our guiding light. And I would say within my career, I did that with 5, 6 teams, and purpose is the thing that makes a very, very big difference in creating that sense of belonging, that dynamic, and that high performance within a team. I'm on to the next shift now, number 5, so 3 more to go. The number 5 is building a culture of trust. And the very first thing in building a culture of trust is psychological safety. And what is psychological safety? Aliyah, I think, mentioned that last week. Psychological safety is when a person feels like I can really say what I think in the team. I can really share my creative brilliance, or I can share my thoughts, and I'm not worried that anyone will think less of me. If I'm disagreeing with my leader, that person might hold it against me. So psychological safety really, I cannot tell you how critical that ingredient is. And it's to appreciate unique contributions and communication styles, to understand that every person is different. There's not one size fits all. It's again back to that individual contributions, to their strength base, to understanding them, and to honoring those, honoring and appreciating those unique contributions. To understand what vital behaviors drive transformation. You know, what behaviors do we need in our team to create that trust? What behaviors do we need to move away from? And really as a team work on those together. And honestly, culture is not difficult when you have trust and you have psychological safety and you know what behaviors are necessary. I always see that companies who work on this basis, who have the psychological safety and who work to create it, and who work on what are those vital behaviors that will help it, especially in change programs, For them, they can drive cultures to change within 3 to 6 months. If they really put a lot of investment in people, in changing behavior, it happens quickly. Culture is not that hard when you have those elements. And adaptive behaviors will come more effortlessly, and people will role model them more effortlessly. So if you need change, you have psychological safety, you have trust, you have those vital change behaviors. That's when role modeling change becomes really, really easy. And of course, you unlock the potential in your team. And this is where people then are willing to give us discretionary efforts. And it goes way beyond just doing a job, having a contract, earning a salary. This is when people really have meaning towards what they are doing. And as a collective, there's meaning in the team. And my top tip here would be sharing more of yourself. If you want to create that culture of trust, it's about sharing more of yourself. Some of you who've seen my LinkedIn posts will have seen that when I came back from maternity leave, I had 12 months of maternity leave. And my daughter decided that this was not for her, although she was only 12 weeks old. And she decided she wouldn't eat at all. She wouldn't eat or drink. She was too young to eat. And my husband had to bring her to the office every day. And I was horrified by this because I wanted to be the in control CFO where everything had gone back to normal. And she had other plans for me. And one day I discussed it with one of the other board directors who was like a statesman, and I really valued his opinion, and he was more of a mentor for me. And he said, you know, it's really shown your human side. And do you know what people say behind your back? They say that you are an immense role model for everyone in this organization. Men started to take paternity leave because I was role modeling this from the top. Now, for me, that was amazing, but that's not what I had intended. I was horrified by it. But what it made me realize is that there's so much power in being more vulnerable and in being just accepting what's there for you and just going with it in that moment. It turned around my whole view. And I would share more with my team. And there was another guy who'd had a baby 3 months before me. He wasn't sleeping very well. And just being able to say, I can see you haven't slept very well either. I didn't either last night. My daughter was also difficult. It creates such a bond and such a trust. So my top tip here is honestly, when you share more of yourself and you're not afraid of the vulnerability and letting go of control, amazing things happen. The next shift, and it's the second last one, is anticipate and embrace an unknown future. I think COVID has shown us that we're not quite sure where we're going in the world with this global crisis and what tomorrow will look like. And it's understanding those emerging trends that are changing and understanding the impact on business and a future way of doing things, being able to predict the opportunities that might come. And the one thing that I would say here is a huge differentiator with all the boards that I work with. Sometimes we don't ask the right questions. Asking powerful questions is one of the most important things we can do. Sometimes we're not even asking the right question. And especially in finance, we really start to deliver, we really start to move quickly to get things done. Change it around. Ask your team, what question should we be asking here? What is it that we should be looking at? What should we be focusing on? First, focus on what are the questions, and once you've defined the questions, cluster them, see if they're right, and then kind of move. It will change the way you operate. I think by having this more embracing the unknown, being more happy with risks, we are more resilient, we have a better staying power, we're more mentally tough, and we can enhance that risk approach. Sometimes we are afraid to take risks in finance, but it's almost like Rita McGrath says, we have to start to see around corners, and we can do that if we ask the right questions. And my top tip around this and the unknown future, many times with boards, we've designed strategies. And when we design the strategies, I always see that there are people who are already unhappy with something, but they're not saying it. Maybe the environment isn't correct. Maybe they don't want to say it. Maybe it's just too hard. My top tip is when you're doing something that's really vitally important for an organization, for a team, for a group of people, a change project, when you're almost at the end of your designing phase, just before you're going to start, I would say ask the question, what will make us fail? It's called a pre-mortem. So you kill it before you start. The most powerful thing I've ever seen in a boardroom. This is when people really tell you why strategy will fail, but do it with a facilitator and do it in a facilitated way where people write on post-it notes. Don't let the chairman or the CEO or the boss say, oh, we'll never fail, I don't think this is going to happen, or something like, oh, just a small thing. Let people do it on post-it notes. Give them free rein. Create the environment where there is trust and safety, and you will see amazing things. It actually shows you how you need to change your direction. I've done this with transformation projects. It's changed the game. It's kind of almost before implementation, sorting something that would have failed within 6 months. So it's a very, very powerful tip to look at post-mortem, kill it before you do it, and understand why people think you will fail. It'll help you to create a far better delivery process. Then the last one is responsible leadership. And this hasn't necessarily just come from my interviews. This is from research at the Institute of Directors, research from Deloitte, and it's a very, very important field. It's about understanding that human well-being should be at the very top of our agenda. The planet and limited resources should be at the top of our agenda, and that we should embed meaning and purpose into all aspects of our work. Before I go on to the so what here, we can see a lot of things changing in the world. We can see that there's now environmental and social governance reporting coming in for big organizations, and where one really wants to see how that lines up with your purpose. I tutor a CPD course for the Institute of Directors on environmental and social governance, and there's really a movement in this trend. How do organizations really make sure that they add to humanity and the well-being of humans, and how do they add to the planet and you know, not just destroy the natural resources? And I think as finance professionals, we have such an important role to play. We have such a meaningful voice in this area. We can really help to change things. And I want to tell you that there is profit in meaning. One just had to look at impact companies that are starting to emerge, B Corp companies that are emerging. There is individual fulfillment. Think about companies like Mindful Chef. When you buy a box of food to cook from them, they give a box to a family who wouldn't be able to afford healthy meals. Innocent Smoothies, a B Corp corporation. They have a real purpose about them. They make a difference. There's meaning, there's purpose. These are things that are changing, and younger generations buy products based on purpose. So I think if we're talking long-term sustainability of organizations and we are not focusing on this, that we will have a real problem in organizations. And so it's really important. And I want to share something else. If you haven't seen the letter from the CEO, Larry Fink of BlackRock, I would really just have a look at that, because, you know, we're quite analytical finance professionals and we understand investments and money. And this is quite fundamental for me. Larry Fink wrote a letter to all CFOs and said how he believes he has a social responsibility. So what they're going to start looking at when they invest in companies is how companies are really investing in humanity and in the future of the world, and in sustainability. And I think if we fast forward 10, 15 years, this is going to be the game changer. Just on the board where I am currently, for instance, it's an automotive captive, so we finance vehicles. Just imagine if we can't get any funding more for our loans because we are only, let's say, having certain cars with high CO2 emissions in our portfolio. We can't be a bank if we can't get funding. So it's thinking like that as a board and starting already to move. And finance needs to be so close to these strategic movements and these strategic things. And I think also in our personal lives, being responsible leaders. I am part of a network of the von Kuhnheim Trust. It's a BMW initiative globally, where they bring together impact investors, they bring together leaders of charities and corporates. And I must tell you, the work that those people are doing it's absolutely phenomenal. It absolutely blows my mind. And it's absolutely convinced me that we as leaders, even in organizations, need to have an impact and make an impact. And if anyone's interested in this specifically, please connect with me afterwards, because I can point you in the right direction to look at some things here. So I would like to, Mohammed, go into views. Mohammed, are there any maybe questions from your side now before I want to engage with the audience on really interacting with everyone by using some polls?
Yeah, thank you very much, Talita. I think it's such a great, insightful presentation on leadership development. And as you mentioned, I think in your first two shifts towards mastery of great leadership, I think it starts from our personal leadership, and it's very much aligned with our leadership framework at HOFT as well, that is based on personal leadership, things like emotional intelligence. Because of course, if we are not able to lead or manage our own self, then how we can manage others? So you perfectly, I think, mentioned these areas as well, and I think these are highly practical steps towards the mastery of great leadership. So we have, I think, some questions, in fact, from the audience. So as we have just a few minutes left, so I would just like to quickly cover those questions from the audience. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Cover those. And if we still have time, then we can do some polling if you want to do that with the whole audience. But
Yeah.
please
Yeah.
do.
Sure. Okay. So the first question is from Steve. Would you recommend financial professionals take on a more formal role in human resources people as a preparatory step to the CFO role?
I would definitely say that spending time, even on a secondment basis in human resources, would make a huge difference. But I think it's not just about a role and doing a role. I think it's about having that mindset of being really interested in the topic and starting to read, watch. You know, nowadays with the internet, there's so much possibility for us. We can watch videos on YouTube, we can read books. You don't even need to read the whole book. I read many books because I read via Blinkist, so I read book summaries. And then if I really like a book, I read wider. So I think there's a lot that we can do apart from also a secondment into HR.
Okay.
I hope that answers Steve's question.
Okay, and there is another question from Mohammed. How can we be ourselves and keep our values while working in the corporate world with too much politics?
Yes, Mohammed, that was what I wrote my first book about, authenticity and the authenticity dilemma, exactly that. I think that you can be yourself by very much connecting to yourself, understanding your values, and almost stepping back from what will trigger you. So just as an example, one of my very strong strengths is individualization. And I used to get extremely unhappy with HR people and my HR team when they would tell me, this is the rule book, this is how we should do it. And I would be saying, but we're dealing with individuals. And by understanding myself better, I understood that that was my trigger. It was my trigger, and I would get angry about that. And I think knowing that, and then knowing where the organization and the politics were, helped me to distance myself. It didn't mean that I wouldn't feel the emotion, but it meant that I could step back from the emotion. And finally, I would say, Mohammed, that if your values are too discongruent with your organization and with the politics, and it's taking too much of your energy, I would say you need to make 100% sure whether that's the company that you want to be with. And I would also say another top tip from me is spend your time with energy angels, not with energy vampires. If there are people around you who suck your energy, don't spend too much time with them. Minimize your time with them. Try to spend time with energy angels, or balance it at the very least within the organizations. I had a lot of vampires, so I had to make sure that I had coffee and teas or meetings with people who helped to boost my energy within the corporate environment. I hope that answers it, Mohammed.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And another question is from Michael. How do we balance deadlines, time pressure, and the need to transform in the way we lead and the manner in which finance teams operate?
I think it's about managing our diaries and managing the meetings that we are in. I think there are many meetings where you go where they are talking shops and they don't have a clear agenda, they don't have a purpose. There's no what are we here to achieve. So I think firstly changing meeting structures. So I changed my meeting structures to starting with my people understood that whenever I wouldn't run all the meetings. I loved them to be empowered, but we would say, what is the purpose? Why are we here? What do we want to achieve? And then we would start with what do we want to achieve, and then we would move to what we wanted to achieve, and at the end say, okay, what are the next steps? And I started to be ruthless, and so did my team. We would sometimes not go to meetings if it wasn't clear what the purpose are and what the outcomes needed to be. Because I think there's something called churn, where board directors, people, we just churn the same idea. You're discussing for 5-10 minutes, everyone's just like adding to the same thing. It's just churning. You're not really doing anything. So stop the churn. Purpose in meetings. And the second thing is giving yourself time and space for strategy. So changing your how you work, that you have dedicated time for emails, because emails can be very distracting, dedicated time for doing, and dedicated time for strategic thinking. And strategic thinking from all the research is better earlier in the morning. So I would always go into the office earlier, do that strategic thinking early. What do I want to achieve? What do I need to do? What needs to be transformed? Then go into the meetings and all the other things with this purpose-driven approach. And I think intention. I think it's very important to be intentional about how you are leading and how you are managing your day. What is it that I need to achieve today? What is really crucial? Focus on those crucial things and make sure that you don't get distracted. The days that I get distracted is the days that I don't deliver that much. So those three things from my side.
Okay. And there is one more question from Alia. What happens when growth mindset and individuals work at toxic firms?
I think this is, back to what I said before. If you're that, I think when, I wish when we hire people that we would go to the place where we hire people based on values congruence with an organization. Because if the values are congruent and the mindset is congruent with the leader and the team, because the team mindset and the leader mindset is really important for the individual, then I think we would have far happier individuals in business. Unfortunately, we don't hire for that. Unfortunately, we hire for skills, we hire based on CVs. And because of that, I think there's a lot of mismatch between individuals and organizations and how people fit. And I think it's up to you as an individual with the growth mindset to say, am I doing this for a period because it gives me a stepping stone to something else? And then I'm accepting that I am working with energy vampires because they don't have the same mindset as me, and it's a bit toxic, and I'm living with that. Or it's about saying, this is absolutely not for me, it's not good for my health, it's not what I want, and I'm going to change my situation. But we all sometimes are limited by our situations, by earning money, by opportunities in the market, especially in a time like COVID. So I would suggest what one does is you find your sustenance in other things, that you find your sustenance maybe in doing some interesting projects within the company that really feed your growth mindset.
Okay. And one more last question we will take from Alex is, how important is encouraging cognitive diversity over domain skills in the leadership team?
If this is the Alex that I know, great question. Alex, it's extremely important. We absolutely need diverse thinking in our teams. The finance of today is not the finance team of tomorrow. If we just see how things will transform with digitalization, the members in the team that we need for future success is not just those traditional finance professionals. We might need coders, we might need people who are brilliant at influencing, we might want to rather take people who have done social studies and understand finance, who didn't major in finance but majored in social studies. And I think having that cognitive diversity then within the team is what will unlock the brilliance and the innovation. I think if we want teams who do things always the same as we did before, then that's the way, you know, then it's going with everyone who does things exactly in the same way. You know, I started to build very diverse teams and take people from other areas into my teams in finance that hadn't worked in my teams before, marketing people, people from more facilitation, coaching background. They made all the difference because they challenged us more and they brought us to much, much better insights and results.
Okay, I think that's fine. So I think due to time limitations, maybe I think we have covered majority of questions. If audience they have more questions, they can connect directly with Talita on LinkedIn, and or alternatively they can send us on our email so we can take any further questions offline. So Talita, do you want to conduct the poll now?
I'm hoping, yes, that people would still be willing to conduct the poll. So I'm just going back. What we're going to look at is we're going to look at the ranking of those 1 to 7 shifts. And I'm going to ask you to say what is easiest in your opinion to implement and what is most challenging. And then as the second poll, I'm going to ask you to choose the 3 that you want to focus your time on in future. And then if you have 100% to share between the 3, you're going to share that. So I'm just going to quickly explain it. So what will happen is we're going to use menti.com. It's going to bring up the 7 options for you. I would please ask you to be quite careful because once you choose an option as number 1, you have 6 options left. It will then show you option number 2 and you choose the next one and then you'll have 5 left. You won't be able to change your answer at the end. So just be quite careful. And how we're going to do it is what will happen in the end is we'll have a ranking looking something like this. So what I'd like you to do now is take either your smartphone or go into your browser and go to menti.com and use this code 3206761 and then just choose from number 1, the easiest shift for you, number 7, the most challenging shift for you. And then we can look at the results afterwards. So please go onto Menti. I'm going to change my screen view. So I've still got it on there, but I'm going to go to Menti to see if you are all voting and how your voting is looking. And depending on, Mohammed, how much time we have left, we can either do the second poll or close it after this.
Yeah, it's up to you if you can. Yeah, it's fine for us. If you have time, you can conduct, no issue.
Can you show us slide 13 again, which includes the 7 choices?
So if you go onto Menti and you input this number 3206761, so go to the website www.menti.com and use that code 3206761, and I'm doing it now on my phone. So I'm putting in my browser Menti and I'm putting in the code. And then it says for the first option, select an option. And then I'm just using the scrolling button on my phone to choose my first one. So what do I think is easiest for me? There we go. I can see lots of you are voting now. So it's definitely 2 people have already voted, all 7. So just give a couple more minutes. Maybe let us know in the chat box if you finished voting, that I can just see how many. Okay, I now have 4 people that have voted. That's great. 5 people that have voted. Excellent. So the votes are coming on. Good comment from Michelle. I'm conflicted between authenticity and professionalism. Yeah, good one. Alex has voted. Steve has voted. Excellent. Just give it a minute or so, and then I'll show you the results. Mohammed done. Excellent. Excellent. Just in the interest of time, I'll stop the survey and just quickly show you the results. So I just want to, I just want to pull this across here so that I can show you the results. So hopefully you can see the results.
Yeah, we can see.
Easiest, leading from the inside out. Most difficult, the anticipate and embrace the unknown future, and the responsible leader. That's what I would have expected. Easiest, building the culture of trust, and an agile mindset, number 4. So great results. Mohammed, do you think we still have time for one more or not?
Yeah, it's fine. If you have time, we can quickly take it.
Okay, so if you go back to Menti now, there will be another question, and it's going to ask you. So just first have a look here at at the screen that I'm sharing, please. So what I would ask you now to do is to, we're going to have again the 7 shifts, and you choose only 3 and allocate a percentage to show the weighting. So for instance, in this example, I want to spend 50% of my time that I have available in building a culture of trust, 30% on focusing on individuals, and 20% on cultivating an agile mindset. So if you could please quickly just exercise again via Menti and the same code as we used before. So same code, it will just show a different question because I've moved on to a second question. Where would you like to spend your time? Which 3 areas? And how would you allocate it out of 100%? So just to get a sense after today, what are your thoughts as a group? Where would you really like to spend your time? What would you like to focus on? Oh, interesting results, very interesting results. So please do vote that we can see if the results change. Yeah, great, great. Just give it a minute or 2 more. People can choose. Oh, great. People are enjoying this poll a little bit more than the other one, I can see. Fantastic. Let me share the results with you. Oh. We share the results here. Sorry, I just have to move something. There we go. So consistent and continuous team development is where people want to spend time, building a culture of trust, leading from the inside out, agile mindset, and then the 2 that we knew were the more difficult ones later. I think those last 2 ones are really the ones that are there for the future, like long-term strategic thinking. That's what we should be thinking. And so this is very consistent. Excellent. Thank you so much for voting there and doing that for me. If you want to connect with me, there are many different ways to do that. Yes, just that's it from my side, Mohammed. I don't know if there's any final questions.
Yeah, I think it's a very well presented, and I think such insightful and practical presentation for leadership development. And I can see from the audience, they are giving very positive and great feedback on your presentation. So thank you very much, Talita. And we hope we can connect again in our upcoming webinars with you, and to get lots of insights based on your new latest research in the field of leadership. And I think that's all from our side also.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mohammed. And do
Thank
check those great leaders out on the hypothesis. They're really great interviews, and they're all for free.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, and thank you all the audience for your time and for your questions and taking participation in the vote. And take care and good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks so much. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.